Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
It was a weekend that began with a wild walk-off.
Cortez delivers. Freeman hits the ball to right field. She is gone! Gibby, meet Freddie!
And it was a weekend that ended with an even wilder walk-off.
Comes down to one last play, and it's going to be getting longer by the second. You're all the way back at the 30-yard line. Now you can step into it. Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line. And the ball is caught! Caught! It's a miracle! It's Noah Brown! Oh, my goodness! This town is going crazy. It's a madhouse in Landover, Maryland. He did it!
Oh, my God. If you thought that the Freddie Freeman walk-off grand slam was going to be the wildest thing that you would see this weekend, wow. I mean, wow. I have been watching Washington football games for over 60 years. I have never seen an ending like that. Now, I'm going to go over some wild endings with this team. Most of them have involved the Dallas Cowboys, and most of them have involved crushing losses. This was one that didn't involve Dallas, and oh no, it did not involve a crushing loss. What an unbelievable finish to a game that was on its way to being a real stinker. And that's what gets forgotten in these crazy finishes. The 1958 championship game between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants that ended with Alan Amici scoring a touchdown in overtime, and it was the first game that was ever played in overtime because regular season in those days would end in ties, but championship game, obviously, you can't have ties. And that is the play that is certainly remembered. But if you break down the rest of the game, it was a pretty sloppy game. And this is a game that the Commanders should have been able to put away with a very ineffective Caleb Williams yesterday, maybe a little bit too jacked up, playing in his hometown. They had a 13-0 lead and probably should have had a lot more points than that. They had very bad penalties. One of them took a touchdown off the board with an illegal lineman downfield. I mean, this was not going to be a good game for Washington until the final 2 seconds of the game with just an incredible finish. And some of the writing today has been tremendous. I think Candace Buckner summed it up with just one line in her column. Jayden Daniels is making Washington's dreams come true. This was Connor Orr of SI. This is how sports go in the age of ready-made dopamine. We can see one of the most unfathomable and beautiful plays we have ever seen. We can see a fan base thrust from its tortured past into something far more proud and palatable. We can see one of the remaining few instances in our culture that still renders us childlike and dumbfounded. A stadium full of people who were ready to burn that place to the ground 2 years ago while their former owner fled the country to evade congressional inquiries just looked for someone to shake and smile and scream for a second. The people at the game will stop talking about what they saw, stop shoving it down the throats of their friends on Instagram, and unknowingly take a step back into the sporting world that we feel owes us a little something more. I'm here to warn you what a mistake that will be, because sometimes this is the best it gets, and man, that was awesome. That was absolutely awesome last night, and I was there. I don't go to many games these days. I feel like I get a better handle on the game if I watch it on television, if I listen to what the commentators are saying, if I get the replays. I just get a better feel for what happens in the football game if I'm at home. But my cousin Howard Berger, who's a 40-year season ticket holder for the Bears in Chicago, has come in the past when the Bears have played here, and he came in this past weekend with his son and a friend, and the four of us went to the game yesterday, and we sat in the station suite. I'm not going to snow you and say, we bought nosebleeds on StubHub and roughed it out. No, we sat in the station suite, and we had the free food and drink and the whole deal. But something happened at the end of this game, which I just have to retell. they had originally, thought this was going to be a 1 o'clock game, which is what it came out as on the schedule. And then only like 10 days before the game, the league said, oh, no. We're going to take this for the prime time. We're going to have the number one team with Nance and Romo, and we're going to move this to 4:25. Well, their flight left Dulles Airport at 10:15. And if the game would have been a blowout either way, a lot of people might have cleared out of the stadium, and they wouldn't have had to sit in traffic so long, and they could have conceivably made it, with time to spare to Dulles. But with a full stadium, nail-biting game down to the finish, the Bears don't score the go-ahead touchdown until there are 25 seconds left to go. And anything could conceivably happen in those 25. And with Jayden Daniels now, more than ever, especially after yesterday, you got to believe. And so it was a full stadium. And they thought, well, something crazy could happen. But after the Bears scored the touchdown, they said, let's get a jump on this. Now, I was fortunate in that Rex Minturn from our station was in the suite, and he was able to drop me off at my car after the game. So I told my cousin and his friend and their son and Howard's son, okay, go ahead, I'll get a ride home. So they jumped in their car thinking that the Bears had this salted away. I told them the station that they could listen to, Bram Weinstein, and we'll hear his call coming up shortly. And that's what they heard trying to make their way out of the parking lot and get to the airport. And the only solace they took, and Howard texted me, he said, at least I wasn't there to see it. But what I was a part of in a luxury suite was grown men my age, in their 60s, bumping chests, going crazy. I mean, it was just a wild, wild scene. And for a franchise that has given us mostly heartache and disappointment, especially for the last 25 years, I mean, it was really something to be a part of. And I just, and I will go through my list of the great finishes coming up, but that was one for the ages. And you think about the career of Jayden Daniels, which is now a whopping 8 games. It isn't even half a season in this new 17-game season NFL. And he is on his way to winning for the 6th time in 8 games, Offensive Rookie of the Week. I don't think there's any way he doesn't win that this week. And he's already built up a legendary resume in just a handful of games. And it's just beginning. Now, health is going to be a big question. But I think what we saw yesterday was him battle through injury. There's no question he was compromised. But he summoned up enough strength to launch that thing about 65, close to 70 yards in the air and throw it up for grabs for whatever may happen. And we'll get to what happened with Tariq Stevenson with the ridiculous showmanship that he was exhibiting and may have cost them the game. But still, he put it in the place that it had to go. And here's the big thing, and this is going to be forgotten too. It's not like he just got the direct snap and launched it. He had to create enough time for his receivers to get from midfield to the end zone. So he was able to extend the play for a full 13 seconds. Not too many guys in the league can do this. Maybe not even Caleb Williams. But he was able to buy the time to get his receivers down the field, to let Noah Brown get behind the big scrum in the front of the end zone and calmly catch the Hail Mary pass for one of the most incredible plays in the 92-year history of the team. Absolutely remarkable. Let's go through the calls from yesterday. Most of you saw it, I'm sure, on TV. We just played the Jim Nance call. Let's get to the Bram Weinstein call. And as you can hear, my voice went south as the celebration went on in the game. But this was the Bram call on radio with London Fletcher to, again, the scintillating, spectacular finish.
Bears at 8 deep. 4 at the goal line. They bring 3. Daniels backing up. He's just going to have to let one fly. Goes to the right side. Steps away from the defenders. Gives himself some time. Now steps up, fires. Heads towards the end zone. It is
Now, Tony likes to say success is really no good unless your enemies are suffering. And I don't think you call the Bears the enemy, but that's as good as it gets. If you're a Bears fan, this is about as bad as it gets. This was on Chicago Bears radio. Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer with the call of what for them was just a devastating ending.
To the left, McLaren, and that's where Jayden Daniels is eyeballing. Jayden Daniels sifting back, being pressured. Jayden Daniels hemmed into the pocket, looking for blockers, looking for something. He's got plenty of time. Launches deep pass into the area of the end zone. Tipped, and it's caught by Noah Brown. He was the tip man, and this place is now gone into bedlam mode. Washington with the miracle finish. The breakup pass into the waiting arms of Noah Brown. Nobody back there. Crushing loss. 18-15 Washington. Hail Mary, 2 seconds left. Or as they like to say here, Hail Washington. That is the gut punch of gut punches. All sorts of time finding the moment to unleash. And Jayden Daniels did. It was back tapped to a waiting arms of a wide open Noah Brown in the end zone. A perfect execution on the offensive side, not so much on the defensive side. 4 plays, 76 yards, and 25 stinking seconds. Unreal.
25 stinking seconds. Does that make up for a quarter century of Dan Snyder? No, it doesn't. But does it start to heal up the wound? Yeah, it's a big step towards that. It really takes a giant leap forward. And I'll tell you this, I have been in that stadium recently for a sold-out house, which I was last year for the Miami Dolphin game. But for that game, it was 75 to 80% aqua in that stadium. As I looked down upon the seats, and almost all of them were filled. They announced 64,000. I don't think the place holds much more than that. I didn't see very much blue or orange. I saw mostly burgundy. And that is a turnaround that I don't think anybody expected this quickly, because a lot of these tour groups had bought seats long in advance to bring in groups of fans. They were cheap and available. Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. Oh, would you like to hear this in Spanish? Yes, we have this in Spanish as well.
Única esperanza que tiene el equipo de Washington, un pase a Ave María, y lo sabe la defensiva de Chicago que se ha echado para atrás. Ahí va Daniels, listo, se sale de la bolsa de protección, lo traen, buen bloqueo, lo va y tiene que lanzar el Ave María, y ahí está, pase largo, Ave María, zona de locaciones, lo atrapó, touchdown, ay, no lo creo, esto es fuera de serie, no lo creo, el pase Ave María, lo atrapó, touchdown, Washington.
Yeah, so I guess there's no Spanish word for touchdown, is there? There's goal, but this was touchdown, Washington. Jayden Daniels, along with everything else, and maybe this goes with the greats. You know, this was definitely the MO for Joe Montana. You might say it was the MO for Tom Brady. While everything else is chaotic around them, they are completely calm. And this was Jayden Daniels, not long after the game, not hyped up, not pumping his fists, just calmly sitting down for the post-game media interview, and was asked, well, what did you see on that play, Jayden?
Nothing really. Just throw the ball up, give my guys a shot. I didn't see anything.
Did you see the end of the play?
No, not really. I just heard people screaming in our sideline rushing the field. So that's how I knew. I was juiced up for sure. I'm excited because, that's kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Like, not too many people get to experience stuff like that. That was my first time. So, obviously, I was juiced up, the whole stadium, team, sideline, everybody.
Well, Aaron Rodgers has thrown 3, and he's been around a long, long time. So it was the first and maybe the last, but wow, something else. Noah Brown, did you ever see a Hail Mary caught more matter-of-factly than Noah Brown? I mean, he's sitting behind the big scrum in the front of the end zone. and the ball just kind of pops up in the air. They are crediting Zach Ertz for knocking that ball in the air. It was Stevenson, the now villain in Chicago, was the one who got his hands on it, but it popped into the hands of Noah Brown, and he said, basically, thank you very much.
Yeah, just last-minute Hail Mary. Try and get down there as fast as you can, box out, keep good position, and, hope Jayden can get a ball down there. He did a phenomenal job keeping the play alive and gave the best ball possible, and we came out with a dub.
Yeah, came out with the dub. Now, here's some irony for you. The first time that I heard the name Caleb Williams was 6 years ago, and it was when he was a ninth grader at Gonzaga High School. This was 2018, and Gonzaga was playing DeMatha for the WCAC championship, and it played out almost exactly for Caleb Williams at Gonzaga as it played out yesterday for Jayden Daniels. All credit to Daniels for throwing the Hail Mary from midfield, but that was set up with a pass to Terry McLaurin, who got out of bounds to stop the clock, and they were able to get close enough so that it wasn't a ridiculous distance where he had to throw the Hail Mary. It was a reasonable, if you can call it that, a reasonable Hail Mary distance. Same thing with Caleb Williams. When he gets the play out of bounds and has one more play left to go, and he throws a 53-yard touchdown pass to John Marshall, and Gonzaga wins the game over DeMatha 46-43. As a ninth grader, he was on the euphoric end of a Hail Mary. As now a 3-year college veteran and a half-season NFL veteran, he's on the devastating end of that.
It's tough. You give them kudos. Obviously, it's a heart-wrenching play to have. We practice it. Trust me, we practice it. And sometimes things just don't go your way. It's tough when it's something like that.
Heartbreaking, yes, absolutely. And they did practice it, and we'll get to that. Matt Eberflus, the Bears coach, explained how they were preparing for that play. It wasn't like it caught them by surprise what they did. And also, there was a play that was set up by Washington. They do practice this. It's not like it's, okay, I'm going to chuck it up there and see who can grab it. There was strategy on both sides. And at this time, the strategy won out for Washington. Coming up, I'll go through some of the fantastic and crushing finishes for Washington over the years. And by the way, did you know how the Hail Mary started? It's a backstory that includes what had happened in one of the most devastating losses this team has ever had, the 50th anniversary we will mark in 1 month. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
There is no one who would call what happened at the end of the game yesterday a last-second touchdown bomb. It is in the lexicon as much as Kleenex is for facial tissue, a Hail Mary. Everybody knows that was a Hail Mary pass. And it's funny how the origin of that began in Dallas with Washington playing the Dallas Cowboys. And next month, I don't want to say celebrate, I'll say mark. We will mark the 50th anniversary of that, what was for me and many others, just an awful, awful Thanksgiving day. It was November 28th of 1974. And Washington was getting ready that week to play the Cowboys. And Dyron Talbert, who was the number one trash talker on the team, and they didn't even call it trash talk in those days. I think they called it bulletin board material, which they didn't care about. But earlier that season, the Cowboys had had a quarterback controversy with Roger Staubach and Craig Morton. And it even got to the point where Tom Landry experimented alternating them on plays. Each would bring a play into the huddle. It was a disaster. They lost the game. And so he had them battling it out. And finally, at the trade deadline in early November, they traded Craig Morton in the division to the New York Giants. So that left Staubach and a rookie that they had either drafted in late rounds or taken as a free agent. I think it was a free agent by the name of Clint Longley. And Talbert said in the week, hey, if we knock Staubach out of the game, all they got is that kid, and we're going to beat them, essentially. That's paraphrasing. The game starts out, and Washington is taking over. Looks like they're going to win this game in 1974. They led 16-3 in the third quarter, and sure enough, Roger Staubach gets knocked out with a concussion. And in comes Clint Longley. And Longley throws a touchdown pass, but Washington answers, and it's a 19-yard touchdown run by Dwayne Thomas. Dwayne Thomas, the former Cowboy who was with Washington in 74. And then, with just 28 seconds left on the clock, it looks like Washington has got this game won, 23-17. All they got to do is play a little bit of prevent defense. Again, less than 30 seconds to play. And the Mad Bomber legend is born as Clint Longley rears back and fires to rookie Drew Pearson, who hauls it in 50 yards for a touchdown and a 24-23 lead. In my dreams, I still see the back of Ken Stone's jersey, number 20, hopelessly trying to catch Drew Pearson as he runs into the end zone with the winning touchdown. Now, this was 1974. Nobody called that a Hail Mary. It wasn't the last play of the game, but it was also kind of a desperation heave there, wouldn't you say? A 50-yard touchdown pass with less than 30 seconds to go. It was not called a Hail Mary. It wasn't until the following year that the play, that type of play, became known as the Hail Mary. And it was Roger Staubach who threw it. Staubach was not in the game to throw the Clint Longley Hail Mary in 1974, but in the divisional playoffs in 1975, as Dallas played at Minnesota, he threw the Hail Mary to Drew Pearson, and this is the treatment that play got on the Roger Staubach Football Life on the NFL Network.
Well, I was young. I was probably about 7 or 8. I was in a store that had religious articles. I took a small statue of the Blessed Virgin. I didn't have any money, so I took it home, and that's when I realized that was wrong. Never taken anything since.
It's all on display right here. Well, the Cowboys need a miracle.
Maybe that's why I named the Hail Mary pass after that or something. They could make up for it, but...
He actually said this in a huddle. Run a turn and takeoff like you did a year before on Thanksgiving Day to beat the Redskins. But run it this time on the right side.
Roger, he's going long. Down the near sideline for Drew Pearson. Pearson makes the catch at the 5. Touchdown! Would you believe it? Staubach hit Pearson on a 50-yard touchdown.
So we win 17-14. And after the game, they just said to me, Roger, what were you thinking about when you threw the ball? I just said, well, I closed my eyes and said Hail Mary. I'm a Catholic kid from Cincinnati. Blessed Virgin thinks a lot of me anyway. I got her on the map, and there's always a time in our life where we need a Hail Mary.
And that was how the Hail Mary phrase was born. And it involved Washington. Now, it wasn't Staubach that threw it, but he remembered the pass that Drew Pearson caught. And again, this is a period of time where Tom Landry is calling the plays. He's got either a messenger guard or messenger running back, and they would alternate bringing in the plays. There was no helmet-to-helmet communication in those days. But Staubach, being the veteran, in the huddle, says to Drew Pearson, this is what we're going to do. And he made up the play on the fly, run it to the other side. And sure enough, he makes the catch. Now, there's, to this day, question whether he pushed off to do it, but there's no instant replay. Pearson makes the catch, and the phrase Hail Mary is born. But it has roots in the Washington devastating loss, which, you know, is really the inverse of what happened yesterday, I think. I mean, that's the way I've as good as I felt yesterday when I saw the ball land in the hands of Noah Brown. That's how bad I felt on Thanksgiving Day when I was 16 years old and saw Drew Pearson catch that pass on Thanksgiving Day. I've got some other games with some incredible finishes, nothing quite like yesterday, but some of them very, very memorable. And many of them involve the Dallas Cowboys, and many of them are devastating losses. But this one was not. September 19th, 2005, This is either a Sunday or a Monday night game. I forget which one it was, but they were playing in Dallas. Now, the opening week, this was year 2 under Joe Gibbs. They had finished 6-10 the first year. So it didn't necessarily look like this thing was going to work out in his second go-round. They start off the year winning the opening game against the Bears, but they don't score a touchdown. They win the game 9-7. So now they're playing in Dallas, and there's 4 minutes to go, and the Cowboys are winning the game 13-0. And Mark Brunell, who didn't look like he had much left in the tank at that point, and certainly it didn't seem capable of pulling off an enormous come-from-behind win on the road in Dallas, somehow made this huge play running the ball on 4th down to keep a drive alive, which set up a 39-yard pass to Santana Moss to make it 13-7. But again, we're in the closing minutes of the game. They get the ball back, and this is somewhat like yesterday, but there was a lot of time left. 2 minutes and 35 seconds to go. Brunell throws another touchdown pass to Santana Moss. That's 70 yards, and they go up 14-13, make a couple of big plays on defense, close out the game 14-13. And it was what we called at the time the Midnight Miracle, because that's about the time the game ended. And this is now 2005, so it's pre-Twitter, it's pre-Instagram. I guess you had Facebook, but people didn't have it on their phones because the iPhone wasn't even invented yet. And there were people, I'm told, who went out to get their morning paper and saw their neighbor, and one would say to the other, "Hey, did you see that game last night?" And one might say, "Yeah, that was really awful. I went to bed." And the other would say, "Oh, you didn't stay up and see the miracle finish?" And so that was one for the ages. And I remember opening the postgame show that night saying, "Die, you dirty dogs, die." And that was just a wonderful, wonderful night. There was another wild finish in what was a bad season the following year under Joe Gibbs when they won only 5 games. That was a 5-11 year under Gibbs, his year 3. And they're playing the Dallas Cowboys, and the season's not going well. I mean, they're 2-5 at this point, and it's looking pretty hopeless. And the game is looking hopeless because it's a 19-19 game, and the Cowboys, with basically no time on the clock, just a few seconds left, have Mike Vanderjagt lining up to kick the game-winning field goal. But Troy Vincent, who now is with the NFL front office, playing his last year in the NFL after a long run with the Philadelphia Eagles, blocked the Vanderjagt kick. Sean Taylor, the late Sean Taylor, picks it up and begins to run it back, is tackled, but is tackled with a face mask. That tacks on a 15-yard penalty, which sets the ball up with no time left on the clock at the 30-yard line. And Nick Novak, the former Maryland kicker, who was filling in, I believe, for John Hall, who was injured, Novak kicks the 47-yard field goal. Washington wins the game 22-19 to get to 3-5. Unfortunately, the rest of the way, they won only 2 games and finished 5-11. The 1973 game, and I was reminded of this by my friend Kevin Blackistone, who was his family longtime season ticket holders. You now see him on Around the Horn, and he writes in the Post. And he was at this game, and he was at the game last night. And in 1973, this is October 8th, 1973, they are playing the Cowboys with Sonny Jurgensen quarterbacking, but he's not filling the air with touchdown passes. They are clinging to a 14-7 lead in the final seconds of the game. There are 24 seconds to go. Dallas has the ball, 4th and goal at the 4-yard line. And running out of time, Craig Morton, who was quarterbacking them, I guess Staubach was hurt, Craig Morton throws a little swing pass to Walt Garrison out of the backfield. Walt Garrison, in the offseason, roped cattle. He was a real cowboy in the offseason, and he was a tough son of a gun, tough to bring down. And he gets the ball to the 1-yard line, and with a full head of steam at the 1-yard line, that's a touchdown. But Ken Houston, Hall of Fame safety, who George Allen had traded a whole bunch of draft picks and players to get in the offseason, corralled him at the 1-yard line, brought him down, and preserved the victory. Now, what you have to remember, 2 things about 1973. It's the year before overtime comes in. and it's also before the 2-point conversion. So if Garrison scores with like 20 seconds to go, the likelihood is the game ends in a tie. It's not a Dallas win. But even still, they preserve the win with one of the most memorable plays in team history. And Kevin, being in the crowd for both games last night and at RFK for that day, recalls a similar roar coming out of the crowd. And I think that's significant in that. A 1991 game, which may be forgotten and doesn't involve the Cowboys, it was the New York Giants. Now, this was the team, maybe the best team that has ever played in the Super Bowl era. It's been named on several sites by that. It's clearly the best team that Washington ever had. They're 7-0 going in to play a Sunday night game against the Giants. And Gary Clark has a terrible first half. Drops, I think, 2 passes. And it's 13-0 at the half. It looks like Washington's got nothing. And then in the third quarter, Clark catches a 7-yard touchdown pass to make it 17-13. And then, 13-7 is what it is. 13-7 at that point. And then in the fourth quarter, Clark catches a 54-yard touchdown pass to make it 14-13. And they tack on a field goal to win the game 17-13. And then, if you're going to remember last night as the most delicious ending in this team's history, if you're old enough to remember going back to 1979 as I am, that's as devastating as it felt. And to me, that's as big a gut punch as they ever had in a regular season game. To me, as a fan, the biggest gut punch happened in the Super Bowl 18, where it looked like they had a great chance to win back-to-back Super Bowls, and they were never in it against the Raiders, who won the game 38-9. But on this day, December 16th, 1979, they go into the game thanks to basically the St. Louis Cardinals lying down like dogs against the Chicago Bears and getting blown out, which meant that if Washington beat Dallas in the final game of the season, they would be the division champs and Dallas would be out. If Dallas won the game, they would be the division champs and Washington would be out. And in the fourth quarter, John Riggins had one of the greatest runs of his career, not the most memorable like the one he had in the Super Bowl, but this was a 66-yard touchdown run. And Riggo, who always just handed the ball to the referee or tossed it to the side after scoring a touchdown, threw the ball up in the air because he thought, finally, I got a team here that's capable of winning the Super Bowl, and we are going to the playoffs with this win. Not so fast, my friend. Roger Staubach, in his last regular season game and in his last great comeback, threw a 26-yard touchdown pass to Ron Springs to make it 34-28. And then, with 54 seconds to go, he threw an 8-yard pass to Tony Hill, 35-34. Washington got the ball back. To this day, both Mark Mosley and Joe Theismann insist that they should have gotten a timeout with 1 second to go for Mosley to try a 58-yard field goal to win it, but they said time had expired. If you look at the replay, they did get hosed on that, but they never got the chance to kick it. Dallas holds on to win 35-34. Riggo said he was so devastated by that he thought he might not play football again. He came back to training camp the following year kind of half-hearted. He did want a contract extension, but he walked out, and he sat out the entire 1980 season. Jack Pardee got fired. Joe Gibbs came in the following year, convinced Riggins to come back and play, and the rest is history. But those are some of the games that have been played that would make you think of what happened yesterday. But as you can hear by the list, the euphoric ending like we saw yesterday at Northwest Stadium is not the norm. The norm for this team is devastating defeat, and in many ways they kind of exercised some ghosts and, kind of made it feel like, okay, maybe the tide has now turned. And, there was a note in Candace Buckner's column today about Mitch Rales. He was in the locker room as Josh Harris was yesterday. after the win. And she writes, when team minority owner Mitchell Rales left the celebratory postgame locker room, his expression was not like the too cool for you Daniels. Rather, he was overcome and undone. Rales was walking with his entourage of young family members, chuckling and believing a higher power must have carried that Hail Mary. Because when you're part of an ownership group that saved this franchise from Dan Snyder's hell, you're allowed to believe in divine favor. Quote, we had them the whole game, and then what's so crazy about it, in the old days, it would have been ... And then he stopped himself. It's a miracle. This is like someone's looking down upon us. Absolutely remarkable ending yesterday. Much more to come on this. Coming up, you'll hear Scott Van Pelt's conversation with Jayden Daniels after the victory. Van Pelt has grown up a fan of this team. He always has a great Thanksgiving story about the Clint Longley game I told you about, where his grandfather suffered a heart attack. Fortunately, they got him to the hospital in time and he lived. But that's the kind of fandom that he grew up with, and now he's experiencing it as a host, and discussed it last night with Jayden Daniels. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You know, prior to the 52-yard Hail Mary pass from Jayden Daniels last night to Noah Brown, this was not, as Jayden Daniels' starts have gone this year, one of his best starts. In fact, you would have called this a very disappointing game for him, because they had their opportunities. They shot themselves in the foot a bunch of times with penalties. A penalty was taken off the board because of an illegal lineman downfield. They had penalties in the red zone, which forced them to settle for field goals, 4 of them. And until that final play, he didn't have a touchdown pass. And his passing percentage, he was 20 of 37, 17 incompletions. Not the worst, but compared to 80% and 71% throughout the season, that was off for him. And this would have been remembered as just okay, it's going to happen. Bears are good defense. They played a good defense against the Baltimore Ravens, and Bears are probably going to be a playoff team. They're in the best division. Everybody's got a winning record. Yada yada yada. And then everything changes with the Hail Mary, and that's all we remember. But the great thing about Jayden Daniels is when he throws a pass like that, it's not like he feels like he's conquered the world. He just throws it in with everything else, takes it in stride, and moves on. He does not seem to be somebody who wants to dwell on great success or occasionally when there's failure. And there haven't been many failures this year. And for a rookie quarterback to be halfway through a season, not quite, but 8 games into a 17-game schedule, he's thrown 2 interceptions all year. 2 interceptions all year. They won the turnover battle last night thanks to this bonehead call by the Bears trying to run a refrigerator Perry with a lineman down at the 1-yard line. Washington recovered, kept him out of the end zone. They got the ball back and scored their touchdown on it. But still, that was not a game for the ages until the final play. And not too long after the final play, Scott Van Pelt, lifelong fan of this team, diehard fan. He's done interviews with Jayden Daniels before, including a lengthy sit-down before they played on Monday Night Football. And this was SVP after the game talking to Daniels.
Cliff told us that one of the plays last week was called Taylor Swift. Is there a name of this play? And if so, what is it?
No, it was just called Hail Mary. We didn't have a unique name for this play. It was just called Hail Mary.
Well, around here, they're going to try to figure out a name for it. Look, this is a game that you guys control most of the way, Jayden, but it's like that Giant game, right? Settling for field goals, and then you're thinking, man, if Chicago gets one explosive play, all of a sudden it feels a little tense. That happens. Then they take the lead, but there's enough time for you guys to do something about it. What happens in those 30 seconds of time when you're like, all right, we've got enough time to make this happen? What's the sequence of events that you guys need to do to give yourself the chance?
Man, you're never out the fight till the clock hits 0. And that's the testament to the locker room that we have. I really didn't know or could tell you what occurred, but man, I'm just happy that we're able to bless to win this game after, like you said, settling for field goals, not really excelling or fulfilling what we wanted to accomplish on the offensive side of the ball. Shout out to the defense that helped us win this game and put us in a situation like this.
A moment like that, you have to be able to chuck it as far as you did. but there's obviously a bit of luck involved. When you let that go, do you have a sense, Jayden, of roughly where the ball is going to come down? Like, I mean, in the air, you know either, oh, that's too deep, that's too short. Help me understand, like, as it's in the air, if you're thinking maybe we got a shot on this.
Yeah, I knew once I threw, I had a shot, just to give the guys a chance to go out there and tip the ball up and maybe catch it. And that's what happened. But when the ball left my hand, I was like, man, all right, as long as I give my guys a shot to go out there and, make a play, I like our chances.
When you get home tonight and settle down, if you go scrolling on your phone, man, you'll see people in that stadium lose their mind. And I always love the vantage point, right, of the person in the different section of the stadium. What's it like on the field after that ball's caught and you guys won?
It's crazy, man. It's kind of just you feel the energy throughout the whole stadium, from everybody on the field to everybody in the stands, man. And, I love the fan base here, man. I love the DMV. I love this organization, man. I couldn't be happier for them.
Look, I told you when you and I sat down for that piece for Countdown, right? Like, my text thread of all these people that have been dormant. They've been waiting on this, man. And the moments like this, we talked about the history of this franchise. I'm an old guy. I've been watching them forever. There's never been anything quite like this moment. Do you have an appreciation, Jayden, of just this singular moment, winning this game the way you did, that something like this hasn't ever been?
100%. Wins are hard to come by in this league, and to win like this in that fashion, man, it's nothing but God. At the end of the day, man, you got to be out there living right. You go out there, but, God and a little bit of luck, man, always prevails.
Little luck and living right, and he seems to be doing both things, and that played a factor for sure at the end of last night's game. But, we've kind of had this before, but remember this. When RG3 was doing his thing at this point in the season, through the first 9 games, they were 3-6. Now, they didn't lose a game the rest of the way, and they won the division at 10-6. This run is taking place now at the beginning of the season, that they are one of 2 teams in the entire conference that has 6 wins. I mean, and the other one hasn't played an 8th game. That's Detroit. So it's hard to get your head around this. It really is. Now, everybody plays this game. It's probably a ridiculous game to play. But if you look at what's left of these 9 games, and what you thought going into the season that 9 wins might get you in, it's probably going to take 10 and maybe 11 to win the division. But with 9 games to go, you got to go 3-6 the rest of the way. And among the games left, it's 2 with Dallas and 2 with Philadelphia. And Philadelphia looks like they found their stride again, and they're playing well at the moment. But things change. It's a week-to-week league. If you split with both teams or you sweep one of the teams, that's 2 wins there. You got Tennessee coming in on Thanksgiving weekend. They stink. They've got the Giants on a short week, and the Giants could drop to 2-6 tonight if they lose at Pittsburgh. And, you could probably bury them at the Meadowlands next week, and it looks like Washington is a much better team than they were when they played the Giants in week 2. So they go there. They're home against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, may be able to beat them. But I'll tell you something else about being there last night. In years past, and even, prior to when things really bottomed out under Dan Snyder in the later years, Pittsburgh travels. I don't know how many Steeler fans are going to be able to get into this game. I mean, this could be a real home field advantage for a team that's sort of used to having some of it on the road. So that's a winnable game. New Orleans, it's on the road, true. It's in the middle of December, but they seem to be falling apart right now. Atlanta looks real good, and that could be a very interesting game. They still don't have the date sets, depending on, where the 2 teams are and where they want to place it, time and date. But that's either December 28th or 29th, second to last game of the season. That could be enormous. And then going to Dallas in the last game of the season. And it's quite possible that, if things continue like this, and we're a long way away from that. Let's not mistake that this is not even going to be played in 2024. This is going to be played in the new year, in January of 2025. But that could be a game that throws the last shovel of dirt on the Mike McCarthy era and ushers in a new era of Washington football with Jayden Daniels and the Commanders heading off to the playoffs. It could be that. It's nice to dream, and you can dream after something like this. Meantime, let me give you the other side of the coin in Chicago. If you are doing sports radio in Chicago today, you are vilifying Tyreek Stevenson. Tyreek Stevenson is being crushed everywhere you turn in Chicago, whether you're walking up and down Rush Street or certainly listening to the sports stations. Get this guy out of here. Now, he did make a big play to wrestle the ball away from Zach Ertz in the end zone. That was a play that saved the touchdown. But on the Hail Mary, if you watch the replay, you see him in the corner of the end zone kind of taunting the crowd like, hey, this thing is over on this last play. And then the ball is in the air, and he goes, oh, shoot, I better get over there. He's the one that actually tips it. They give Ertz credit for tipping it up in the air for Brown to catch it, but it was Stevenson who actually got his hand on it. But he got there too late and probably should have been in the back of the end zone defending against Noah Brown. He did put out an apology on Twitter last night. He said, to Chicago and my teammates, my apologies for lack of awareness and focus. This game ain't over until zeros hit the clock. Can't take anything for granted. Notes taken. Improvement will happen. But Herm Edwards, former coach, now back with ESPN, this is how he would have handled it had that happened on one of his teams.
It's real simple. You're going to show this to the football team with Tyreek in the meeting. You're going to suspend him.
Wow.
For conduct detrimental, and you're going to fine him. And you're going to show the team we can't have a lack of judgment. We just can't. You're a good player, but what you did, you cost this team a game. Basically, right?
That's how the fans view it for sure.
Your job, you to be a professional football player, not a cheerleader, not to talk to the fans when the game's going on, but to do your job. And Coach talked about it. And when he's in the press conference, he says, we go over this all the time. When he sees the tape of how these guys defended it, he's going to be sick. Every coach, you walk through that every Saturday. You walk through that, and guess what else you walk through? The kneel play when you're winning the game. You walk through this all the time. There should be a defender. First of all, the rush was awful. But there should be a defender right now, like basketball, screening guys off. Should be one jumper. Should be a defender on the tight end, right in front of him. Not jumping, just stay right in front of the tight end, and the ball will come to you and you'll knock it down. So this thing was screwed up all kind of ways. But when you watch what he did.
Right. It just makes it worse.
He's talking to the crowd, and the ball is in the air, and he's like, oh, I better go over here.
Yeah. Now, look, as a head coach, Herm Edwards is a great soundbite. He provided one of the great sound bites in history by saying, you play to win the game. But his record as a head coach, not real good. He was in Kansas City, he was with the Jets, and he spent a lot of time on television. So he sounds good saying it. I don't think Tyreek Stevenson is going to be suspended. In fact, I don't even think the Players Association could do anything like that. I think they would make sure that that doesn't happen. He could be fined. Certainly he could be benched. But he actually is a good player and made a couple of big plays in the game. Now, he did get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty as well when he was mixing it up with Terry McLaurin. But I would highly doubt that he gets suspended. But, man, as much praise, and deservedly so, as much praise as is being heaped on Jayden Daniels today here in Washington, if you can transport yourself to Chicago, Tyreek Stevenson is public enemy number one. I mean, this is a Bears team that had a lot of hope and a quarterback that was seemingly getting better, though he had a bad day yesterday in Caleb Williams. But they did have a chance to win that game, should have won that game. I mean, the percentage on a Hail Mary in that position at that time, very, very low. But they made it happen, and the Bears take the L. Washington gets the W. Much more on this in the next hour. More reaction from Dan Quinn, Noah Brown, and also an NBC roundtable as they looked at this on Sunday Night Football. You can't talk about this enough. If you came here today looking for something else, yeah, we'll get to a little World Series at the end, but this is a day for the ages for Washington, D.C. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Can we talk about the Hail Mary too much? Will you reach a point of saturation where you go, enough already, move on to something else? Yeah, we might get there, but I don't think we're going to get there in the next hour. There are other angles to cover on this. This is a play for the ages. This is a play that I think we'll be talking about in 10 to 15 years. And in many ways, we may point to when they do get really good, and maybe, if you want to dream, Super Bowl champions, we will point to October 27th, 2024, as the day the ghost of Dan Snyder's ownership was exorcised by a rookie quarterback. The kid did it and was standing by, ready to go with Tracy Wolfson moments later.
Dan Quinn looking for people to hug, and we go down to Tracy.
I mean, look at Jayden right now. He's so cool, calm, and collected. How are you right now? Can you describe that final play?
Nothing but God, man. Nothing but God. Without him, I didn't even think I'd be playing this week. But, man, all glory to God.
You talked about not knowing whether you'd be able to play. How difficult was it for you out here having to play through that rib injury?
A lot of long hours, long days. But I put myself in the position to go out here. But, man, like I said, nothing but God, man.
Well, it looked like your rib was okay with that final pass. But what is it about this Commanders team?
We keep fighting, man. We keep fighting. We got a great locker room, great brotherhood. Man, nobody else I'd rather go to war with.
You know, you heard Nance say before the throw to Tracy that Dan Quinn was looking for somebody to hug. And, you know, kind of what goes round, comes round, goes round. 41 years ago, University of Houston played NC State in the championship game. And the announcer, the radio announcer for the Houston Cougars, who were overwhelming favorites to win the national championship against a very much underdog NC State team coached by Jim Valvano that had to win the ACC tournament championship just to get into the NCAAs. There was only 48 teams in those days, and they would not have been selected as an at-large, but they knocked off some giants on their way to the ACC title, including Ralph Sampson and Virginia, the number one player in the country. And they pull off the upset with the and really the ending of that was as dramatic as what happened last night, as you have Lorenzo Charles taking a missed shot and dunking it in over a dumbfounded Akeem Olajuwon, and NC State wins the championship, and the enduring image is of Jim Valvano running around the court looking for somebody to hug. The stakes weren't quite as high with this game last night, but the hug factor was similar. And this was Dan Quinn in the postgame news conference.
Do you recall who you first saw or grabbed after you saw it with the catch?
No, I felt, rest in peace, a little like Jim Valvano, just running around, not sure what to do and where to go. So I don't know who. A lot of the big guys beat the hell out of me, so it's a wonder why they play in the NFL and I never did. Yelling at me and hugging, and I feel like I'm 6 inches off the ground with a big hug. So it was. Honestly, it was just a wild moment.
Yeah, absolutely wild, and that's exactly how he started the news conference last night.
Man, that was wild. That was so much fun. And what I love about the team is that, we're never out of the fight. And all week we had talked about the ball would decide the game. Chicago had a fantastic track record of taking the ball away and being very successful doing that after they've created, a turnover margin. So for us not to turn the ball over, that was a big deal, and we thought we'd have to knock one out. And the goal line fumble turned out to be the second biggest play of the game. But to get into the plus, that was a big one until the last play. And what I learned tonight, I don't know if I learned it tonight, but I wanted to acknowledge in that locker room is a group of really tough people that genuinely care about one another and play and coach for one another. And that's a hard thing to assemble. And it's not easy, and it takes work, and you got to go through tough nights like tonight, which at times was very frustrating. And but to see this group stick together and know that, man, we're never out of it, and that's a really big deal. So I wanted to acknowledge that as we get started. So now I'm ready for your questions.
Dan, a bunch of players said you guys practiced the Hail Mary. How close was that to perfection of that play, and kind of how much time do you guys put into practicing that?
Yeah, I thought the plays also leading up to it were a really big deal, because when you're in that spot, you don't have timeouts, and we used one early, obviously, to get out of bounds, to give yourself a chance at the next play. And I thought the real factor was there of Zach Ertz, going up to get a tip, to keep the ball alive, for Noah to get there, because it's hard just to go up and snatch it. So you almost have to go up and expect a bounce or a tip to go. And I thought Jayden did a fantastic job of, buying time over to the right side. I don't know how long the play was. Maybe you guys might, but it took a long-ass time. 13 seconds. Yeah, I felt every bit of them.
Yeah, I mean, that was big. And the two things he mentioned there, to set up the Hail Mary, he completes a pass to Terry McLaurin at midfield. That was huge because you can throw a Hail Mary, but throwing it from your own 30-yard line versus midfield makes a hell of a lot of difference. And the fact that he was able to run around as long as he did, that gave the receivers enough time to set up in the end zone. It was basically like a play under the basket, and they had enough people under there or on the goal line there to set that up, to block people out, and then you put Noah Brown back against the end line, so he's there for the tip, and they executed it perfectly. But it doesn't get set up unless they have time to do it. And the time that Jayden Daniels bought doing that made an enormous difference in that play. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times with games like this, it gets completely forgotten what the game was like prior to that last play. Now, you could say this is one of the greatest games in team history, and you'd be right, the way it ended. But if you looked at the game top to bottom, this was not a beautiful thing. They made a lot of mistakes in this game, mistakes that they had not been making. They had been putting the ball in the end zone. And prior to the Hail Mary, they had to settle for field goals, mainly because they had penalties. Now, the penalty numbers don't look that bad. 5 penalties for 30 yards. But if you look at how those 5 penalties broke down, there were a couple of false starts in the red zone, which kind of took them out of contention to get in the touchdown range and had to settle for field goals. And a touchdown came off the board because they had an illegal lineman downfield, and they had that again. They had twice in the same game. So as a coach, and this is always a good thing when you're a coach, where you have an opportunity to criticize your team, but also criticize them after a win. And that's kind of the luxury that Dan Quinn has after this. We'll hear more from him later today, but this was his take on it last night.
Yeah, it was a frustrating game because there was plays to be made, and so a penalty might have knocked us out, or maybe a drop here and there. So I thought the execution felt off from what we're accustomed to. But I would say also some of that we have to give credit to Chicago's defense. They're a tough and rugged group as well. And at the end, those are things that we'll clean up to fix, but it wasn't what we'd hoped we would do. Like yards can be sometimes deceiving. I thought we missed some opportunities out there tonight, and that's when frustration can set in. I just wanted to make sure on the sideline, it's the next one, the next series to go, that can make the difference.
Coach, have you been a part of a game like this before?
That was my first Hail Mary touchdown score, so no. I've been on plenty where we threw them, but that was my first connection with him. So, I was out of my mind. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Some more follow-up on the Hail Mary. You talk about practicing. They practiced executing it. Believe it or not, now, thanks to Stevenson, they screwed it up. But as Matt Eberflus said after the game, they had actually practiced defending this.
And we've practiced that play 100 times since we've been here. And, again, I'll have to look at what the execution was of that, but we have a body on a body, boxing guys out like basketball at the very end. We have one guy that's the rim that knocks the ball down. We got a back tip guy that goes behind the pile. So, again, I got to look at it and detail it out and make sure we're better next time. But, again, that's a hard way to lose. But, again, I was proud of the way the guys battled all the way through.
Well, that's he will look at the film and he will see, Stevenson screwing up like he did. But this is the kind of thing that you can't have happen. I mean, you got to be ready. It's just like any other play. It's a 60-minute game, and you have to be ready to defend that. And clearly, they weren't ready to do that. So anyway, last night, Tim Hasselbeck was on with Scott Van Pelt, and he usually comes on after these Sundays to break down the games, and obviously they spent a lot of time on this. Hasselbeck made an observation, which you probably made as well, that this is a quarterback who's clearly hurt and playing through it, but playing through it well enough to make the play like that. But also on the defense of the Hail Mary, there's criticism to be handed out, and it's deserved.
They have 5 guys down there. Scott, all 5 guys go for the football.
Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to box out, which is why Noah Brown is back here all by himself. Like, it is one of those things you practice all the time, but you never practice it live because guys get hurt. It's a jump ball situation. So even in training camp, you don't practice it live. So you have to trust when you get into that live environment that guys will say, all right, I'm a box out guy. I'm not playing the football. The other thing is this, and I know TJ would always say, hey, knock it down, knock it down. There's two different philosophies on that. Guys are used to playing the football, going up and catching it. Trying to knock it down happens what happened with Stevenson, where you swat at it, you mistime it, and the ball goes in the air. But so it's one of those things. There's so many elements from the offensive perspective. You said it. It's really the play before that gives you a chance. If that play before doesn't happen, then you are in a situation where Daniels can't reach the end zone. You're defending pitchy woo-woo. You're not defending the Hail Mary.
I invented that.
Yes, you did.
Caleb Williams, most of this game was not good. But when push came to shove and the game was there to be won, what did he show you?
I thought in the biggest moments of the game, he played his best football. And I think that it started to feel like hey, this is two good young quarterbacks battling against each other. And so Chicago, for that, should be encouraged. But for the Hail Mary stuff, it's going to be hard to watch.
And a quick thought, just what in terms of the victory, Daniels, his numbers were better. This would have been a gutting loss for Washington, who largely had this game in control but settled for field goals. I mean, sort of the same thing. What does he show you beyond just that last play?
I think the big thing for him is he's clearly not healthy. So the way he competed in this football game, and then when he has to heave one nearly 70 yards, ribs bother him and everything, that'll mean a lot in the locker room.
And I think, I would put it at 80% plus that we see Daniels next week. But a lot of it may depend on how he looks today and the rest of the week. He took some shots yesterday, and he may have further exacerbated the injury. That's possible. And this would not be a shocker to me if they go to New York next week and he's inactive. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think for the good of the team and the the momentum of all of this, I think it's best for him that if he can possibly play, he'll play. But again, they're playing the long game with him. They want to play it safe, and the shots that he took, you could see him really wincing when he was coming over to the sidelines. And you just heard Tim Hasselbeck, who played the position for 5 or 6 years, actually played here a little bit, saying that he's hurt. And I'll be interested to hear what Dan Quinn says today about him playing. I'm pretty sure he's not going to give any indication that he won't play, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does sit out next week as a precaution. They got big stretch run coming up because after they play the Giants in New York, they're home against Pittsburgh, then 2 division games back-to-back at Philadelphia, November 14th, and then home against Dallas on the 24th. So those are things that they have to be concerned. They have a nice little bye because that's a Thursday night game. That's another thing. It's a short week. So here's what they're facing here. They play the Giants in New York next week. Then they have a game at home against Pittsburgh, but they got to play 4 days later at Philadelphia before they get a bye. So I would think before they have that little stretch there of the 3 games within the Week 9 game next week and then the Week 11 game at Philadelphia, that compressed schedule, that they want to make sure he's healthy. One more follow-up on this Hail Mary here, and that is, if you remember 1991, they started off the year 7-0, and they're going into a Thanksgiving game. Excuse me. Oh, they were 11-0. They were 11-0, and they were going into a Thanksgiving weekend game against the Dallas Cowboys at home. And undefeated talk was running rampant. Like, okay, watch out, Miami Dolphins. Here come the Redskins in 1991. And Cowboys were a year away. They didn't win the Super Bowl until the following season. They were good enough to be a playoff team that year, but not good enough to be Super Bowl contenders. And they came into RFK, and I think Washington got a little bit lackadaisical at the end of the half because Troy Aikman threw a Hail Mary pass on the last play of the first half to Alvin Harper, 34 yards, and that turned a game that was close. I think it was like 7-7, and that made it 14-7 Cowboys, and they never looked back. They held on to win the game, and that was really the only real loss of the season because in the final game, They were playing Philadelphia. If they were going for an undefeated year, I don't think Joe Gibbs would have done this. But he took out all of his starters against Philly, and they lost in the last regular season game. But they blew through the playoffs with Atlanta and Detroit and then blew out the Bills in the Super Bowl. But when you think of that season and what kept it from being an undefeated season, in my mind, that's what it is. The Hail Mary pass to Alvin Harper at the end of the first half. Michael Irvin didn't catch that, but was on the field for it and had some, as he looked at it last night and watched that play, reaction on his podcast as to why that play worked and how it's actually set up.
Jayden Daniels scrambled around for a while and gave everybody time to go get downfield to set up, which is very important. Very important. Because a lot of times you don't get the set up in the proper position for the Hail Mary. The Hail Mary has positioning on it. You have one guy you call a point guy. He's the guy that's going to stand in the middle. He's going to jump. You tell the underneath guy to line up to end up 5 to 6 yards in front of that guy. So if he jumps and tip the ball to you, you can catch it, try to make a few moves, get in the end zone. And the other guy got to line up 5 yards behind you. And then once the jumper jumps, he's going to try to tip the ball back to you in the end zone. That's how it's drawn up. It rarely works that way, if not ever works that way, but today it did for the Washington Commanders. They Hail Mary the game and won that game on a Hail Mary in the last second, and it was pandemonium in Washington.
Praise from a formerly hated Dallas Cowboy. Doesn't get any better than that. We're going to do follow-up tomorrow, I'm sure, on this game and this wonderful night at Northwest Stadium. Bram will have his say next. Tony's up at 2 o'clock. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.